agency, NAMA, lost a 5-year battle at public expense to prevent details of its loans and properties being provided to the public. Taoiseach, why would NAMA want to prevent citizens knowing about its activities? And isn't it totally unfair and unjust that the taxpayer may have to pay for NAMA's efforts to prevent the very same taxpayer knowing what NAMA is doing, supposedly, Taoiseach, in the name of the taxpayer? NAMA has been shrouded in secrecy since its inception. It only became subject to the Freedom of Information Act last year, something which we campaigned for and we have produced a bill for. And billions of euros continue to be sold off by NAMA, billions of public assets, to vulture capitalists without any proper democratic oversight. And given the scandal at IBRC and the government's failure to protect the public interest, and given the sell-off of Clerys and the government's refusal to legislate to protect workers and concession holders, surely there's an urgent need to look at how NAMA is doing its business. There are networks within networks of insiders and powerful vested interests behind many of these deals. And some of them are on NAMA, but they are buying assets for themselves or for third parties. Taoiseach, how is this allowed to happen? They're actually in NAMA, but they're able to acquire assets either for themselves or for third parties. And there's also concern that NAMA is engaged in a fire sale of assets to meet an arbitrary deadline set by the Troika and now being driven by Minister Michael Noonan. So, Taoiseach, considering the public concern that now exists, will you agree to a suspension of non-contracted disposals activity at NAMA for a time-limited examination of the books with a view to ensuring that the best interests of citizens are being served?
Well, as you know, the Troika have left, and many of the propositions that they put forward were not acceptable to the government here, and government put up alternatives that were pro-growth and pro-competitiveness in the interest of growing jobs and our economy, unlike what was left to us with the remnants of a government that faded out. Now, Deputy, you raise the questions of Thank you, Deputy Kelleher. You mentioned the issue of NAMA. You're well aware that the accounts of NAMA are comprehensively audited by the gCeannairí's office, and that is entirely independent and objective, and I'm sure you accept that. There's a permanent team of staff based in the NAMA agency from the gCeannairí's office with unrestricted access to all its records and all its files, including files and records relating to all those transactions, completely independently. So if there is a concern about any aspect of NAMA's work, and you've mentioned one here, it is within the power of the gCeannairí to have that scrutinised and investigated, or any aspect of it investigated. The gCeannairí has produced 3 special reports already on NAMA's activities, and they have been broadly positive in their assessment of how NAMA is managing the complex business of the very extensive portfolio that is acquired. So those reports, Deputy, were generally positive about the managing of its business and its conduct. All gCeannairí's reports on NAMA have been subject to full scrutiny by the Dáil Committee on Public Accounts, and these reports are available on the NAMA website for everybody to see. And I understand that the CAG will commence work shortly on his 4th special report. So in the sense of accountability and public transparency, the independent watchdog both of the Dáil has considered, and the Arnotts has considered the reports, and the gCeannairí has a permanent staff in NAMA, access to all of the files without restriction, and 3 reports have been published to date on the website, broadly supportive of the work being done, and the 4th report has now been commenced.
Deputy Adams.
But what you've outlined happens after the effect. And what I've asked you to do, and you dodged the question, is to suspend non-contracted disposables activity for a time-limited examination of the books. Recently, the Dublin County Board of the GAA failed in a bid to buy the Spa Well Centre from NAMA. though it offered more than the 6.5 million asking price. Now, why would that be so? Common lower class scale, obviously an organisation of which we're all proud. Isn't this the type of project which NAMA, a state agency, should facilitate? It didn't, but it did facilitate Noel Smith of Fitzwilliam's Finance Partners. Now, Noel Smith was on NAMA's top 20 developers list. In 2013, he paid 200...
No, sorry, Deputy, this is not a place to be making charges that we can't stand over. Please.
Sorry, Sean Cornell.
No, we've always had a tradition here that we don't name
I'm not
people.
making a charge. I'm stating what's
We don't
on the public
name
record.
people. It's tradition.
All right, Sean Cornell. In 2013, this person, who I cannot name in this democratic forum, but who is involved with a firm called Fitzwilliam's Finance Partners, paid €230 million for loans owed by Arnotts, and he secured 50% of the company. This anonymous person, and what he's just done, is a perfect example of someone who is subject to NAMA, acquiring assets while subject to NAMA. In this case, who from? From the IBRC. And last week, this anonymous person, whose name is in all of the newspapers, but I can't name him, I'm advised,
Well, I mean,
bought the other 50%.
You know what I mean. He
bought the other 50% of Arnotts. So, Noel Smith, dare I say the name, now owns Arnotts. He controls Arnotts. And what Taoiseach is to stop him from doing at Arnotts what was done at Clerys. It's perfectly legal under your flawed legislation. And workers at Arnotts are understandably concerned about this, and little wonder, given how the legislation favours the elites and not the citizens. So, Taoiseach, to ensure, I'm not suggesting any impropriety here.
Well, then what are we raising it for?
To ensure.
Of course you're implying.
I wish, Concordia, you wouldn't interrupt my flow when I'm asking a legitimate question.
I'm here to protect the citizens as well as the members, and it's traditional. Members should not comment or criticise or make charges against a person outside the House. That's a long-established principle in this chamber.
Well, I couldn't hear what you said.
And as long as I'm in this chair, that's the way it's going to be. When I'm gone from this chair, somebody else can.
Concordia, I couldn't hear what you said because of the heckling.
Well, if you'd like to come to me afterwards, I'd show you what the established principle is.
I know what it is, Concordia.
And making charges against people that implies wrongdoing.
I'm not entirely ignorant of my responsibilities or of my entitlements
from time to time
as a duly mandated
name people in the chamber.
I made no charge.
Well, then why are you naming them then?
Because it's in the public interest to do so. And what I'm asking the Taoiseach to do is to ensure that NAMA prioritises the interests of the citizens and the taxpayers. Will he not establish an audit, an independent audit, of remaining NAMA properties to determine which of those could be made available for social and economic development?
Thank you.
And I also repeat my first question, to agree a suspension of non-contracted disposables activity for a time-limited examination. Given the public concern, these are issues of huge public concern. Could you not do those two things that I'm asking you to do?
Well, I'm not going to interfere in any way with the Commission of Investigation set up by the Arnotts here in respect of matters pertaining to IBRC. As I said to you already, Deputy, NAMA has a dedicated number of staff from the CNAG's office in there with access, unrestricted access to every file, every register, every transaction. Now, I think it's important that I appreciate the independence and the objectivity and the transparency of the CNAG's office. I'm sure you do as well. And they're in there with NAMA as these transactions go through. I would point out to you that the CNAG, as part of a special report on NAMA's progress from 2010 to 2012, found, following a review of NAMA disposals with a gross proceeds value of €1 billion, they said, and I quote, "Evidence that almost all property disposals had been sold through an open, competitive process or with testing of disposal prices against market valuation. This, the CNAG concluded, provided assurance that, and I quote, prices obtained were the best on offer in the market at the time a property was sold." For instance, 1 Warrington Place was a place that was sold. That asset was sold following an open market competitive sale process. It attracted substantial investor interest. The property was advertised over an 8-week period. There were 40 site inspections, 19 credible first-round bids, 8 parties invited to submit final bids on the basis of the strength of their first-round bids, and the asset was ultimately sold to the highest bidder after another bidder at the same price withdrew. And that purchase was by a global investment fund, marking only its second-ever acquisition in Europe, the first sale of a major commercial building in Dublin for over 5 years at the time. And the international investor interest generated by that sale stayed in the Irish market and has contributed to the recovery that is now evident since. I would suggest to you, Deputy, that because of all the interest that is being raised by deputies from all sides of the House about matters relevant to NAMA, they set up a particular facility for members of the Oireachtas at oir@nama.ie, where they invite you or any other deputy who has an issue with NAMA to contact them through that facility. And I would say to you, you've raised a point here. Test it and see the response that you get.
Thank you.
And I would say to you again, Deputy Adams, I'm sure that you accept the utter independence of the CNAG's office. 3 reports have been published, broadly very supportive of the activities here, and the 4th is underway, and there are personnel from the CNAG's office in NAMA, access to all the files, all the registers, all the transactions, and I know that you don't expect me to interfere with the work of the Commission of Investigation being set up with IBRC.
Deputy Maureen Sullivan.